listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. The goal? To know Jesus a little better so we can live like him a little more. And now, here's today's host, Brandon Connor.
Hey everybody, I want to welcome you guys back to another episode of The Loop. I am really excited about the episode today because today we're doing a preview of a new sermon series here at Mosaic, and the new sermon series is called How to Deal with a Narcissist. And so in the studio with me today, I've got a couple of friends, Miss Donna and Ozy, and so I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll jump into the topic.
Hello, everybody. My name is Donna Lewis. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been doing therapy with clients in this area since about 1996. And I believe that God has called me to this profession, and so I'm very overwhelmed and happy to be able to be here and to be able to help you all to understand what narcissism really means.
Awesome.
And how it can affect people's lives.
So glad you're here, Miss Donna. Ozy, so glad you're here as well.
It's my second time doing this, and it's always, an exciting kind of challenge. But I've been here since October at Mosaic Church. I was brought on board to serve as pastor of care and life change, and it's been an adventure in just a short time, meeting all kinds of folks. I'm happy to be here. I do have some clinical experience as well, working as an outpatient therapist and mobile therapist when I first started. But most of my experience is just working with people, in the streets and as a pastor and connecting with all kinds of folks out there. So
awesome. Well, we are glad you guys are both here because I know very little about narcissism, but I know you guys know a little bit more than me. And so we really want to just kind of pick your brain because, in today's episode, I just want people to start thinking about this subject because to me, it feels like narcissism is kind of a buzzword of the year. It might even be a buzzword that's been hanging around for a couple of years, but I hear a lot of people talking about narcissism, talking about how their life is being negatively affected by some narcissist that they know. And so I just want to start the conversation today by asking, what is narcissism? Let's just start there for people who may not be really familiar, or even for those people who may think they know, but they don't really know. What is narcissism?
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. You might want to share your...
Narcissism is basically a colloquial label that people have put on people that tell them what to do, that seem to be overly conceited and self-centered, who have very little empathy about other people around them.
Okay.
And usually that applies to people what we would call an overt narcissist.
Okay.
Overt narcissists are the ones that I am so perfect, I am so good that I deserve special treatment. I'm better than everybody else. I don't need to follow the rules. Everybody should acquiesce to me. Everybody should do what I want because I am just so special.
Wow.
That's basically the overt narcissism.
Okay.
Okay. There's also a covert narcissism that people don't even think about. And sometimes they will marry each other. The covert narcissist is, oh, poor me. I have had it so bad. You need to take care of me. You need to give me special privileges because, I think it's so horrible. I just don't know what to do. It's just so bad. Please help me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's the same thing. And this person then is controlling the other one by manipulating them. If you don't do this, I'm going to kill myself.
Oh, wow.
So it's very, very manipulative to be able to control others. So there's different ways, overt or covert, but they're both narcissist.
Okay. That's helpful. Ozy, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think I'd only add, my understanding is there's also a clinical diagnosis for it, but it can only be done by a psychologist, someone that's actually qualified to do that, not just the average person, Yeah. And so NPD is a lot different than those that, have these tendencies and these traits of narcissism. So Donna's completely correct. And I think what makes the difference, just in a nutshell, is to get that diagnosis, you have to meet certain criteria. You can't just have these traits. There's got to be other things that go along with that. So all of us, and I think Brandon has said this to me too, I think all of us kind of have these tendencies and traits from time to time.
Yeah. So I've heard a couple of things already. I've heard lack of empathy. I've heard the word manipulation. I've heard the word control. Are there other tendencies that you see in narcissistic people, whether it's, mildly narcissistic or, extremely narcissistic? What are some other tendencies that you might see?
Grandiosity.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
I am just so special. I am the best therapist in the whole world.
Okay.
Nobody can come touch me. But narcissism actually has a continuum, as all different traits do. So it goes from very low to very high. And some of us might just have these moments where we just feel really good about one thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
But there are others, to make the narcissistic personality disorder is that it becomes pervasive, that it's all different situations. No matter if you're at home, you're at church, you're at work, you're in a relationship with someone, it goes across all of those. And so, it's pervasive.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful because I think, as I listen, I think, well, isn't there some degree in which we're all a little bit narcissistic? I mean, I've heard leaders say things like, well, there's a fine line between leadership and manipulation. I think about people being controlling and, maybe a parent is concerned about their kids and so they're controlling, or maybe we're worried about our finances and so we control every penny that's being spent. There's a sense in which, like you just said, everybody thinks they're good at something. And so I guess,
self-confidence.
Yeah, and that's self-confidence, which is not always a bad thing. It's just understanding your giftedness and self-awareness and how God has made you. And so I guess for me, it's like sometimes people just look at these traits and they may see just a mild version of them and they just want to throw a label on someone that may not be helpful for the person who's being labeled or for the relationship as you try to interact with them, because now we're into name calling and you're just a narcissist and there's no dealing with you.
Yes.
Like, help me out with that, because you keep using the word pervasiveness. Like, where are we supposed to draw the line in terms of like, hey, this person is truly a narcissist and I need to know what I'm dealing with, versus we're all a little sinful and this stuff plays out in our life all the time?
There are a couple of different things that you were saying that gave me some different thoughts on that. One of them was that the intent of the person. Okay, so if a person's intent is to glorify themselves, that would lead more towards that narcissism. Yeah. Whereas if they're thinking it through and this is the best for everybody, concerned, then I would think that would not be a narcissism, but doing what's best and could possibly be misinterpreted by someone else and labeling, which could be damaging to everybody in the relationship. Okay. So that wouldn't be a good thing to do that. Yeah. But recognizing the intent of it is really, really important.
That's really good. So intent and how pervasive is it? Because everyone has some degree of tendency in which we could be accused of being a narcissist. Is there anything else that you would add, Ozy?
I believe as you converse with someone, get to know them more, work with them, spend time with them. And this is why marriages eventually, like within the first 6 months to a year, it's like I just married a whole different person. It bleeds through if these tendencies are really, truly intrinsic inside and they bleed through, will be seen. And you'll know if this person just has a fault and they're willing to work on it, or they just really believe that they're correct, that they're the best, that they're right. Because one of the other traits that stands out for a narcissist is no empathy. And so if you're seeing that all the time, and there's no attempt to at least understand the other person's point of view, you're dealing with a narcissist.
That's great. That's great. Let me ask you this. Why do you think narcissism has become such a hot topic in our world today? I think I was telling you guys before we started recording, like 10 years ago, I hadn't really heard anything about narcissism, and yet now it seems like it's a very popular word. I don't know if we would say it's trending on Twitter or X, but like it seems like a word that a lot of people use. What do you think is happening in our world that so many people are seeing narcissistic tendencies in others, or what's causing this to become such a common word that people are using today to describe the difficult relationships that they're having with others?
I can start, and Donna can continue. Some thoughts that come to my mind are some theology type things where we expect in the last days for people to just kind of be puffed up, lovers of themselves. And I know the last days theologically includes, 2,000 years, but we have seen just an increase with all kinds of last day kind of expectations that we all have, like countries kind of coming together. The world's becoming smaller. We're seeing like technology go to like this. I'm going into theology there, but I don't know. My thought is this is kind of a biblical alert that, hey, this is going to come one day, and we're seeing it happen. People are just selfish, completely selfish. That's just one aspect, and we see that increase in our culture. You just see a selfish, ambitious culture, and it's about me.
Wow.
And you see that in social media when you look at social media.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. I was thinking about, if you were to go back prior to the invention of social media, no one had a web page about themselves.
Right.
They didn't. We weren't taking selfies. We weren't always updating the world on every little detail of our lives and where we are and what we're eating and what we're doing. And, but it's like, wow, with the invention of social media, almost everyone has a web page that is devoted strictly to themselves. And so it is in some ways, some of these cultural trends like the selfie, like the social media, it's like causing us to look more and more and more at ourselves. It's an interesting development, throughout the history of man. Is there anything else that you would add just in terms of why you think it's such a popular buzzword, Miss Donna?
I'm going to come from a different perspective. I'm going to come from a developmental perspective.
Okay.
And a psychological perspective. First off, narcissism comes from the Greek story by, I guess, Ovid about Narcissus. And he was a man that fell in love with his own image.
Yeah.
And so he's not recognizing who he really is. He's looking in some propaganda or something else that he wants to project. And so recognizing that, he can do something from a biblical perspective. We forget who we are. We forget that we are God's child. And so we then don't have God to look up to. We only have ourselves. And so that creates an awful lot of fearfulness.
Wow.
It creates a lot of, inability to accept responsibilities and to be able to relate to anybody else because we don't know who we are. The Bible tells us to love others as we love ourselves. Well, if we don't love ourselves and we love this false image of ourselves, how can we love or have empathy for anybody else?
Wow.
And if we're afraid to be who we are because we don't know who we are, how can we have relationships that are healthy with anybody?
Yeah.
And so developmentally, this has started, I think, in the 80s with the Me Too movements and what was it? It's all, I forget. We could be anything in the 80s, it's all about us, that selfishness. And then we grew up and then we got our computers and we loved our computers and our phone more than we loved our children. And so when our child came over and said, Mommy, pick me up and hug me, go away, I'm on the phone right now. Can't you see I'm busy?
Wow.
And so we didn't then get that consistency of having a loving parent look in our eyes and say, you're worth something. And parents weren't teaching their children that you are loved, that you're a child of God. And fathers weren't an image of God for the child in that family.
Wow.
Because they were so busy with their football games or whatever it was that they were into and about themselves, and that they were not teaching the children that they were loved and kind. So a lot of the children grew up empty. So they call it because they're going to be narcissists now because they don't know that they're lovable. And there's something called shame. And you can look in the, psychology, is that shame is the pervasive feeling that a narcissist feels. And so they feel so much shame inside.
Really?
That they cannot be a real person. They cannot accept criticism. They have to be in control because if they're not in control, bad things will happen. They have to put on a false face because if someone looked at them inside, they would know that they're trash. And so it's a very, very bad thing to have the shame. Now, shame is different from guilt. Guilt is you made a mistake and you can repent of it. And then you can be, Jesus will let you, repent of that and be washed clean.
Yeah.
And so you can move forward. But shame is, I am a mistake. I should not have been born. I am no good. Jesus died for everybody else, but not me.
Wow.
And so it's really, really hard. And so I'm glad that you're doing this because this is going to help a lot of people who feel that shame inside of them, who may not be overt narcissists, but maybe be a covert or maybe on the small, the continuum, a little bit of narcissism where they're not sure. Because these damages that were done by a parent that wasn't interested or a parent who was drunk or a parent who was abusive, those are the ones that said, you should be ashamed of yourself. By beating that child believes that they are responsible for their parents' anger.
Wow.
And so they put it in. So actually, narcissists are people that are very, very hurt.
Wow.
So,
and you wouldn't, on the outside, you wouldn't look at a narcissist because there's usually people of power. I mean, the reason we're doing this whole series is because it's a look at the life of a man named Nebuchadnezzar. You look at this guy who's a king, he's in power, he's in control, he has no empathy, he's threatening other people. You wouldn't look at him and go, oh, that guy's riddled with shame.
But it's a projection.
That's interesting. There's always something that's going on deeper that's driving these behaviors.
I'd like to add something. I agree 100% with Donna. I think I've heard, like everything else, there's layers. Sometimes there's other origins to things. And so like the entitlement and all that could come from an upbringing where you had everything too. And so that carries over as well into your adulthood, where you become a narcissist because that's how you've been ingrained, trained, indoctrinated to live life and think, I'm special. I've always gotten everything I wanted. That's not going to stop anymore. And I think maybe that's where Nebuchadnezzar falls into. Anyway, so this is a great conversation.
It can come from two angles. It can come from shame, or it can come from the fact that you were spoiled rotten.
Well, it's from shame or it's a training. You have been trained and indoctrinated like this. Because I have seen, as a therapist, I have seen mothers who wanted to have children. They had, miscarriages. And then when they finally had a child, they would not correct that child. They gave that child everything. They would sacrifice themselves. They would do whatever that child wanted. So that child ran the household. Wow. And so that crowd grew up to be a narcissist. But that's the way the child was trained.
So let me ask you this. What happens in a person's life if narcissism just goes unchecked indefinitely?
It's a great question.
That would kind of depend on how bad it was. If it was just a little trait here and there, they could probably have good relationships, but they might hurt some friends. They might lose some friends somewhere along the line. If they were overt, they could become president. I don't know. It all kind of depends, but it's a relationship thing. If you're not having empathy, how can you have a positive relationship with someone?
Yeah. Wow. So really, relationally, you suffer for the rest of your life if narcissism goes unchecked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's really, Bible talks a lot about this, self-righteousness.
Yeah.
I think it might even work against us with our relationship with God.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you guys, I know we've talked about, things like control and manipulation and lack of empathy, but I think one of the words that's coming into my mind, or two words that are coming into my mind, are pride and humility. That, a narcissist may exhibit a tremendous amount of pride and they may lack any real sense of humility. And it seems like, think about Scripture, and Scripture says that God opposes the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. And I really do believe this. I believe that because we are made in the image of God, we have the same reaction as God to people who are prideful or humble. And so, typically speaking, when our kids are prideful, or when a coworker's prideful, or a spouse is prideful, there's something inside of us that just opposes them. But when we see humility on display, there's something inside of us that gives grace and favor toward that person. And so, if I got a coworker who's struggling and they're so prideful, they won't admit that they're struggling. Like, man, you're killing me. And I find myself opposing them. But if they're humble and they're going, I know I'm struggling and I just want to get better. Can you help me? All of a sudden, that favor and that grace comes out toward that individual. And so I think it's so important just to think relationally, like if you have narcissistic tendencies, and I think it's important for us to recognize that we all do in some measure, there's a little bit of narcissism in every single one of us. And if it goes unchecked, it's going to cause a lot of relational damage because we're going to get puffed up with that pride, and we're going to find people opposing us rather than that humility that leads them to give us grace. Let me ask you this. As we think about getting into a whole sermon series, and I know that this is going to be about a 4-week series, but I also know that there are going to be other resources that we make available to people, because I'm not going to be able to address everything that needs to be addressed in just 4 35-minute messages. And so what are some of the other resources that we're going to be making available in the weeks ahead?
One of the things I'm excited about, Brandon, is we're offering a Mosaic family, a chance to respond through a support group. And Donna Lewis here has agreed to help facilitate discussions and help people in this group. And it's going to kick off on February 12th. I believe it's like right after the second sermon on this topic.
Great.
So we're going to be midway into the series. We're going to offer this support group for anyone that's interested to come out, and it'll be Monday nights at 6:30 to 7:30.
Great.
And Donna will be facilitating that. So we hope.
Is that going to be 1 week, 2 weeks? How long is that going to be?
Well, I think that one will be just 1 week, and then we will do another one after 2 more sermons.
Right.
And so that we will be able to catch everybody with their questions and such that they have.
Great. Wow.
So in total, it could be 3 weeks to 4 weeks possibly, depending on the response and what's happening in those sessions.
Wow. That's great. Anything else that we're going to be doing? I know you mentioned another podcast, and it sounded like there was something with kids involved. So talk about that.
I'm excited about that. Many of you know Cece Ballard. She's here in Ocean Springs as a children's specialist and therapist. Licensed as well, of course, and you might have met her. And so she's agreed to come back to this podcast. She's been a guest before. So we're excited to have her come on board, and we'll explore those dynamics with the childhood to it. We also have one more thing we're willing to help with. If you take advantage of it, folks want to use this, is join the sermon series as God prompts your heart. Hey, I need to maybe look at myself. It just, we could talk about this too, but narcissists tend to not think that the sermon applies to them. It applies to the other person, because they're perfect.
Yeah.
But hey, if you're the type of person that God is prompting you to be, I need help, and my spouse is telling me to go to this, and I think I want to listen to her because I want that marriage to work. We have our care team that's willing and to meet with anyone. So whether it's individuals or couples, our team is ready to sit down with anyone that wants to come out and take advantage of that.
Wow. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm really excited about this series. I'm excited about all the resources and opportunities that are going to be available throughout the series. I do believe that faith plays a big part in our battle with narcissism. If we feel like we're a victim of a narcissism or of a narcissist, I think our faith leads us to forgive. Our faith leads us to speak the truth in love. Our faith leads us to be full of truth and full of grace. And all of these things that we're going to learn together in this series are going to be things that will help you navigate some difficult relationships. But it's also a faith that reminds us that we're not God, but that there is a God, and we need to know who He is, and we need to know who we really are. And so I just think that as we try to navigate such a really hard issue, what I know is that there are a lot of people in secular literature who believe that there is no cure for narcissism. But I believe that the cure for narcissism is in a relationship with God and in the things that He has taught us. And so I'm really, really excited about this series. Again, we're going to be kicking off this series here at Mosaic Church. We have services on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, and then we also have services here in Ocean Springs on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30, and then we also have services at our Harrison County campus at 10:30 as well. We hope that you'll join us as we kick off this new series called How to Deal with a Narcissist.
You've been listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. For more information, visit us online at mosaicgc.com.